Hello, I'm Pamela Hutchinson, Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Bloomberg, and I'm excited to welcome our guests for this segment. Both from Facebook, we have Sheryl Sandberg, COO, and Maxine Williams, the Chief Diversity Officer. So before we get into the meat of this conversation, I just want to pause for a moment and acknowledge what happened, the tragic news of last night. 8 people were killed in Atlanta. Some we know were Asian American women. Whilst, of course, we don't know the motivation behind this, it is against the backdrop of violent crimes against this particular community. So I'd just love to know and understand, Maxine, what is Facebook doing to support employees who are affected by crimes against the Asian and Pacific Islander community?
Yeah, thank you for starting with that. This has just been an incredible tragedy to wake up to. And in the midst of the increase in crimes against Asians and Asian Americans, we've seen a 1900% increase since this pandemic began. And it's scary, it's frightening, it's horrible, and it's unacceptable. So we have been doing a number of different things. The first thing is we have to think about how do we support our employee population? How do you hold people when they're going through so much tragedy and there's so much fear? People are afraid to go out of their homes. They're afraid to take a walk in the street. On top of all of what we have, come to be afraid of from this virus and this pandemic. So we've done a number of different employee moments and reach outs and posts and, raising awareness, but it's not just within the Asian community. You want to also make sure that the broader community is there in support. So the goal is to raise awareness and to reduce hatred and racism. We've done activations through our products on different platforms. We've done partnerships. We did a great one with the Ad Council, Fight the Virus, Fight the Bias. And, look, there's a lot of people out there who are very much committed to seeing this reduced. We know the racism didn't begin yesterday. We know it's probably not going to end tomorrow, but it is our job to make sure that there's progress and we keep people safe and give people dignity.
No, absolutely.
And as always, there's a tragedy. Our hearts go out to the people involved, and we have to be concerned with the broader levels of how we treat each other, what kind of society we live in. I'm glad you paused.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your starting our session this way. Thank you.
So pausing just a little bit longer on violent acts. Earlier today, we heard from Melinda Gates, who spoke about the 2 biggest barriers for women being caregiving and abuse. Sheryl, domestic violence has traditionally been seen as something that happens in private and within the family, and it's a matter that is done, that is behind closed doors. But what do you think the role is of organisations now that they have to play in relation to domestic violence, particularly as home and work, for the majority of us at least, is exactly the same place?
Look, a third of women will experience violence or sexual assault in their lives. A third, 1 in every 3. It's a horrific number. And that's before coronavirus, where we know that domestic violence is spiking. The majority of that, again, even before coronavirus, is at the hands of a partner or a husband. Now, I think people really don't understand how universal this is. I think we often think of this as something that happens to other people. That's not right. This happens everywhere. It is every geography, including our own. It is every socioeconomic group. It is every background. It's every gender. Happens to men as well, even though the great majority are women. And it's absolutely skyrocketing during coronavirus. Things that exacerbate these problems: unemployment, financial worries, being cooped up at home, all of these things. This is a pandemic that has a very broad impact. And I think part of this summit you're doing is talking about what is the responsibility different people have and different companies have. And we take ours really seriously. We actually just rolled out, I'm sharing it today, a new policy on domestic violence, where if you and this is important, your family member is a victim of this kind of violence or sexual assault, we're giving an additional up to 20 paid days off. Now, we have very broad leave policies. We had leave for this before, but I think this is us really recognizing that this is something that affects everyone, including our employees. It's a situation where you need paid time off, and not just for yourself, but for a loved one. I think too many situations with corporate leave, we give leave, if we give it at all, we don't give enough of it. We should talk about that. But we give it to the individual, not necessarily for their family, and we want to do both. And we're hoping that this is a problem other companies will start tackling as well.
Well, thank you. You're leading the way in terms of policy around domestic violence. You heard it here first, folks. I think we've all got a lot to learn from your leadership on this. Thank you. If I could just pause for a little bit longer and just about the impact of the pandemic. Look, we've recently celebrated International Women's Day, and there's increasing data to show that women are adversely impacted by the pandemic, both professionally and personally. So if we stay with this year's International Women's Day mantra, what is Facebook choosing to challenge both inside and outside of the firm? Maxine.
Well, go, Maxine, please.
No, Cheryl, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The International Women's Day is always a big moment, right? But this moment is part of a movement. So we are continuously on the course to empowering women, to trying to reposition, to re-level this playing field. And so, over the course, this gives us a good time to sort of come together and look at it in its face and say, okay, what are we doing? Have we done enough? So for instance, for us as a company, a technology company, it has always been really important for us to increase the representation of women in tech. And, over the last 7 years, for instance, we've moved from 14% to 25% women in technical roles, which is really important because who's building your products, right? So you talk about International Women's Day and empowerment, but as a technology company, it's important for us to have that at home as well, to give people voice, to make sure that what we're building reflects those we're serving. And so it is a great moment. We come together, we have like all of our women in the company come together. We have a day of learning and togetherness and building, but as a means to continuing on this road to progress.
It's pretty
Cheryl.
interesting. We started coming together for Women's Leadership Day. Oh my God, many years ago, right after I think I first joined the company. I joined the company, there were 550 people at Facebook. And today we have 550 senior female leaders, which I'm really proud of. And this was really important. We had to do our International Women's Day, Women's Leadership Conference on Zoom because we're not yet back in the office. And we were actually so big that we didn't have a place in all of Northern California that we could do our North America Women's Leadership Day this year. We were going to have to travel out of town. So coming together on Zoom and enabling us to do it was really important. My foundation, Lean In, also partnered with International Women's Day to talk about fighting bias, which is one of those challenges that we have. We have a program called 50 Ways to Fight Bias. We have a lot of bias fighting programs in Facebook, but it's at leanin.org if anyone wants it. It's completely available for free. And it really goes through. I think the thing about the bias women face in the workforce is and people of color face, sometimes it's out there and it's known and everyone knows what they're doing. But a lot of times people don't even realize it. They do not even realize what's biased. Maxine has been a huge voice of helping people see the small stuff and the big stuff that they're missing. And I think what we all need to do is acknowledge that we all face bias. We all feel bias and come together to really try to fix it.
And acknowledge that we all commit bias, right? That's the other thing, is that we all have to acknowledge that we are all actors contributing as well. So we need to continually be doing the work on ourselves to recognize the bias that we are perpetuating and to counteract it.
So just touching a little bit longer on this sort of notion of bias and the impact of bias. Look, last year was a year of reckoning for sure. Vis-a-vis social justice, people took to the streets, they took to social media, venting their frustrations, galvanizing support. At the same time, of course, we saw a rise in racism and bigotry. So in a previously, we asked our audience for questions, and our audience are very keen to understand what role social media has to tackle bigotry and what Facebook is doing to utilize its resources to help shape a narrative of diversity, inclusion, and equity in society.
So this, Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
mean, again, we can speak for hours about this.
Me too.
Because you've positioned it correctly, right? Is that we're this tool that people use to express themselves. And so you're bringing together all of the people. And in the course of that, you're going to get the good and you're going to get the bad. And it's our responsibility to highlight and to support the good and to try to reduce the bad as much as possible. Cheryl, I don't know if you want to share some of the stats on hate speech and how we've approached that.
Yeah. And I want to be really clear on this. We stand against hate. I think sometimes people believe we want hate on our platform because people click on it. That's absurd. Users don't want to see it. Advertisers don't want to be near it. It is not good for our business. It is not what we stand for. It goes against our values, our principles, everything we want to do. Now, finding it and taking it down on a service of our side is obviously the challenge. And even defining it, right, can be very tricky. So we've worked for a long time with civil rights leaders. We did a very large audit for many years where we got their feedback and we continue that dialogue. We just hired our first VP of Civil Rights, Roy Austin. We're really excited to have him. He's working with Maxine to lead these efforts. Hate speech on Facebook is 0.07% of speech. So it's far lower than I think most people think. That's still too much. And I want to be clear, any amount is too much. And our goal is to find it and take it down. And that's something we've really been working about. We release very publicly and transparently how much of different kinds of bad speech we find on Facebook, how much terrorism, how much nudity, how much hate. And we release those numbers and we say what percentage we find ourselves versus what percentage needs to be reported to us. And it's obviously better if we find it ourselves, because if our systems are finding it, fewer people are likely to have seen it if it's reported to us. So when we first started releasing these numbers years ago, of what we were able to take down, we found 24% of it ourselves. That's not great, because that means 76% of it was up there for someone to report. Today, we're at 97%. We are finding 97% of it. And that's because we've invested just billions of dollars, tens of thousands of people. But, and I want to be clear, 3% on Facebook is still much too much. And so our goal is to find it and drive those numbers down and make sure that we are not having hate at all on our platform.
Thank you. Good to hear. So let's pivot just for a moment and talk about some of the challenges the tech industry and Silicon Valley are facing around diversity and inclusion. But before we do that, I want to go to a poll that we ran earlier, which will be coming up shortly. Here we go. The poll question was, what is the biggest challenge to increasing diversity in Silicon Valley? And as you can see here, the top answer was, or response was, pervasive bro culture, closely followed by more girls in STEM and management accountability. So let's just touch on the culture within the tech industry. I mean, look, every industry has its own unique challenges around diversity and inclusion, but what are the specific issues that you're finding across Silicon Valley and the tech industry? And as a big player in the space, what are you specifically doing at Facebook to address some of these challenges?
I would say that the most important thing that we've been doing is trying to get more ways for everyone's voice to be heard. So here we are, this platform that creates opportunity for voices in the world to be heard. People can use the platforms for free. They can share and express themselves. Internally as well, when I see the term bro culture, it's interesting because I do think a lot of these companies were started by bros, right, which is maybe short for brothers, code word for men, guys, right, young men who may bring with them, and I don't want to reduce all of them to one stereotype, but it's not the most diverse set of people. And the number one thing, actually, I think, is that these companies need to start as soon as possible. If you have a certain group of people who are your sort of seed group, right, and you're not deliberate about understanding the value and the need for more diversity, you're going to get bigger, but you're just going to expand against the same pattern that you started with. So that's how you can end up with a company that has a certain culture that seems to be exclusive and that sort of omits all of the other assets, right? All of the other benefits it could get from more diversity. So the number one thing I actually think is like your rate of like intervention. You need to get there and get there quickly. What we've been doing is creating more and more opportunities for there to be more different people, and then structures for there to be more voice. So it's one thing to like all of a sudden now you've invested and you have lots of different people from different backgrounds. But if you don't have a way for them to be heard, a way for their difference, their cognitive diversity to be applied, then it doesn't make any sense. So we've been trying to do both at the same time. We've done a huge effort to increase the diversity of our population. And thankfully, I can say that we have grown in diversity year over year since we started focusing on it. But you have to focus. Inequity did not come about organically. So to change that, to counteract that, you have to be deliberate as well. And then we have been focusing in parallel on inclusion. So for instance, now we have a diversity advisory council, right? Where we are leveraging the differences in our population, the different people, by having a structural way that they can give input into product development, policy development, etc. Because that's the whole point of it. It's not to tick boxes and say we have different people. It's to actually have that diversity that you can leverage to build better things. Your culture also, so the bro culture people are speaking about, that will change when you have people from a different culture who are working together and you have the environment for inclusion. Cultures are dynamic. So it's on us as well to push for their change. We develop different norms and different expectations as we have a different population that we're working with.
And I was really glad to see that that poll recognizes as well the role of getting enough girls into STEM. Because let's be clear, women are 57% to 58% of the population attending college in this country and in most countries. And we are 18% of the computer science concentrators. So you're not getting to 50% if you do not change that number. And here's a sad story. I enrolled my daughter in, little computer science camp many years ago. The kids were like 10 years old. The parents are deciding who enrolls. I forget the exact numbers, but there were maybe like 30 kids in the class. And there were 3 girls, 2 of whom I put in the class, my daughter and my niece. That's Silicon Valley parents right now. And if that doesn't show us that we're not fixing those numbers in STEM, and it starts early, we are still doing to little girls that they are bossy. We are still telling little boys that they're good at math and little girls that they're good at writing. That's just not true. We need to change that. We are not going to fix the problems in our industry if women are 18% of the computer science majors. We have to fix that number as well. Everything on the bro culture is super important, and we have to get those numbers up because, as Maxine says, they're interwoven. We have to do one to do the other.
Absolutely. Maxine, I just want to ask you a quick question around now your new reporting line into Cheryl. Look, we recently published a feature about at Bloomberg about the boom in hiring chief diversity officers since the killing of George Floyd. More than 60 companies since last year have now, for the first time ever, created a post of chief diversity officer. Now, but as the article actually points out, this is not the silver bullet, just having a chief diversity officer. And in fact, we're starting to see high turnovers in the chief diversity officer population due to a lack of budget, resources, and direct reports. But your role has changed reporting lines, which I thought was quite interesting and not completely unique, but pretty unique. Can you talk to us a little bit about the benefits and opportunities for Facebook with you now reporting directly to Cheryl?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. The first time I met Cheryl, I don't know if she remembers this, but I ran up to her and I said, hey, you did X, and I thought we could have done it much better. And I think we could have done much more focus on race and had a bigger impact. And her reaction was not, who are you? Why are you speaking to me like this? What are you talking about? Her reaction was, great, then come help me do it better. And that has been our ethos. That's our way of working at Facebook, which has really worked for me, is that we really want to tackle the problems. And so the way we have been going until now is that we have been inclusive in the sense that, I will get a call from Cheryl or other leaders when something is happening that was clearly about inclusion, diversity. And so there aren't any sort of solid walls there, right? Doesn't matter who I report to. We want to be able to fix the problem, leveraging the expertise we have. What has changed with me reporting to Cheryl is a broadening of that experience and moving from ad hoc to structured and consistent. Almost like, we all in the winter would be happy for a space heater because it would make the room we were in really warm. But how much better is it when you have central heating, right? So this is sort of that move where now I'm in every room because there is the assumption that there are inclusion issues in everything. And you don't want to just go to them when it occurs to you or as an afterthought. You want from the beginning that we are considering that in the way we would every other major issue. So it's integral. So I think that has been the major change for me reporting to Cheryl and now participating in a broader range of meetings. And I think it's been great in terms of the impact because, again, we can get to things earlier. We have different perspectives in the room. I may know nothing about how to build a product, but I certainly know how the products we build impact the people who use them. And having that insight early on, I think, is just really beneficial to us and to the people we serve in the world.
Thanks, Cheryl. I know you want to say something.
Yeah. Well, we hired Maxine 7.5 years ago. And it's actually really fun because Maxine and I have done a million things internally together. But I think this is our first public stage. So I was really excited to share her with the world because she's absolutely incredible. But look, we hired our chief diversity officer 7.5 years ago. The commitment to this has to come from the top. And having Maxine officially reporting to me puts her in every meeting. It puts her in my staff meetings, Mark's staff meetings. But what I would say to other companies thinking about doing this is there's lots of different structures and lots of different ways you can do it. But here's what you have to do. You have to believe it's critical for your business. We have to do this not just because it's the right thing to do, even though I want to be clear, it is. Getting more women into leadership roles, getting more women into your company, getting more people of color into leadership roles and into your company, getting more women of color, because that's where the intersectionality of race and gender makes it the hardest challenges. We have to solve these problems for Black and Latinas, have to, for those women as well. You have to know that it's good for your business because it is. There is so much data that diverse teams make better decisions, have better results. Look at coronavirus. I've been arguing that we need more female leaders for a long time. The countries run by women had lower death rates. If there was ever a proof point that more diversity of leadership and female leadership mattered, the world just handed it to us. And it's a very sad one, but it's one we should be paying attention to. We believe, not just me and Maxine, but Mark, our product leaders, our CTO, our Women at Group is sponsored by our CTO. Our Black at Group is our exec sponsor, is our head of our business, whole entire sales organization, who's white. We believe that this has to be everyone's priority because it's good for our business. It's going to build better products that serve the people all over the world. You have to believe that. And then everything else falls from there.
Thank you. It's very evident how passionately you believe in that. And I think, it's really important to help drive the agenda, not only across Facebook, but I hope others are listening and heeding Cheryl's words. We've probably got time for one last question. Since the advent of the BlackBerry, I think this whole notion of home and work has become increasingly blurred. And of course, the pandemic has brought us into each other's homes, whether we like it or not. And employers up and down the globe are realizing that home most definitely does impact on how people engage in the workplace and how they contribute to the workplace. What have you been doing at Facebook to meet your employees' needs, to meet your employees' needs right now to enable them to be able to thrive at work?
This is such a question because we are in an economic crisis, a health crisis, and a crisis for people in the home, but largely for women, because women bear the great majority of the burden of taking care of children and taking care of elders, caregiving everywhere in the world. We're seeing women drop out of the workforce in tremendous numbers. We've seen over 2.5 million drop out of the workforce. In December, women lost more than 100% of the jobs that are lost. And in case that's a head scratcher and you're wondering, that means women lost jobs and men gained. That's how women can lose more than 100%. So we're in a crisis. And that crisis has to be met with two things. One, we need equality in the home, full stop. And we are not going to get to equality workforce until we get there. Right now, the average couple, if they're married, if a man and a woman are together, raising kids together, that woman is doing an additional 21 hours of housework and childcare over that man a week. That's half a full-time job. And if you are a single mom, women of color are more likely to be single moms. They're likely to get even less help. Those numbers are dramatically higher. And so if we want equality in the workforce, we are going to have to get to equality in terms of taking care of kids. And then the next thing is we need better public policy and we need companies to step up. We're behind Saudi Arabia in offering maternity leave. A tiny percentage of our people in our country get family leave. We need to fix that. We need to fix it. It needs to be legislation. There's no other ways around it. And then companies need to step up. We recognized that it couldn't be business as usual once coronavirus hit. We canceled our performance cycle for the first half of last year, just canceled it and paid everyone out at more than 100% your bonus. Because we realized that if we were like, oh, we know you need to take care of yourself, but same cycle, same rating structure, same bonus structure, people weren't going to believe we meant it. So we canceled it. We give very generous leave policies across the board. We added an additional 10 days of coronavirus leave, and then we reset it for this year. And importantly, not just if you get coronavirus, if someone someone in your family does, if you have to take care of a child, we do our leave very, very broadly. We include everyone for all family situations, adopted children, step parents. We want to support all different family situations. We know there are a lot of different family structures out there. And I think we need to see more companies really step up, provide bereavement leave, something I'm very personally passionate about. Provide leave for maternity and paternity and get men to take it. Mark Zuckerberg, Mike Schroepfer, our CTO, when they had babies in the last few years, they took the leave and they took it publicly. Very important. And make sure that companies are stepping in to help take care of people, because we have a really broad responsibility to do that.
Thank you. Well, sadly,
we're also still learning a lot. As this goes on and we think about the future of work, we're learning a lot in terms of how people have responded and what has worked and what hasn't. And then we will iterate on that as well. I think we have to listen to our people as well, because they will teach us a lot about how they are productive and what they need.
Thank you. Well, sadly, we've come to the end of this segment. And my thanks to both Cheryl and to Maxine. This has been both passionate, insightful, as well as inspirational. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us and for having the summit. It just brings a lot of attention to an area we all really care about. So thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.